Well, the Finnish government staunchly refused.
He's telling you
as
to
this
shut up.
pact of friendship would involve giving up. So all the
Really,
politicians
please
spoke of peace.
shut up.
While the Finnish Defensive Council around.
Hey guys, what is going on? Welcome back to another Metal Fan reaction video with me, Draven. Thank you so much for tuning in. Like I mentioned, every Saturday is going to be a Sabaton history. Every Saturday, every Sunday, we're going to do a episode watching their Sabaton history stuff where they do a deeper dive into their songs. Normally they come out with videos like on Wednesdays and Thursdays for this, but for some reason they actually came out with a Sabaton history today. It just came out this morning. It's going to be about Soldiers of the Three Armies. Part 1 went to war, and I mean there's going to be a part 2, so we'll do a reaction to that whenever they release it. So hopefully they'll release it today or potentially next week, and so tomorrow's video might be kind of weird. They're doing a Skype call, looks like, or a Zoom call. I wonder if they're in lockdown. But either way, guys, let's jump right into it. Thank you so much again for all you new subscribers. Make sure you hit like, comment, and subscribe if you're not subscribing. And let's get to 1,000 by the end of the month. So without further ado, let's jump right into Soldiers of Three Armies.
I'm Indy Nidell.
And this is Joaquin from Sabaton.
And this is Sabaton History.
Doing a special since we are on Corona lockdown.
Oh.
So unfortunately we're on Skype right now, but hope you'll understand.
We understand. We all understand.
Today's episode is the first part of a trilogy.
Oh.
And why are we doing 3 episodes? Because it's about Soldier of Three Armies.
Oh.
Okay, as you can see, or probably see, I am not in Bavaria in the Time Go Studios filming this. I am in Stockholm in my apartment doing this, and my friend Ryan is helping me out doing lighting with whatever lights we have and with his camera and a teleprompter that I found through an app. So Ryan, say hi.
Hello.
That's Ryan. And
Hello.
This is Soldier of Three Armies Part 1. Right. Lauri Törni was born May 28, 1919 in Viipuri, Finland on the Karelian Isthmus. He had quite a calm childhood, but the older Lauri grew, the more he became aware of the troubled recent history of Viipuri and his country. In 1917, the Russian revolutions during the Great War had torn the Tsarist Russian Empire, which Finland had been a part of, apart. As civil war then exploded in Russia, Finland took the opportunity to declare its own independence. A bloody Finnish civil war followed as well. But unlike in Russia, where Lenin's Bolsheviks would eventually take control, in Finland they were defeated. Viipuri, well, all of Karelia, still bore the scars of the war, and a border of watchtowers and barbed wire separated Finland from the Soviet Union. Beyond the border lay Soviet Karelia, part of the new worker state. Throughout the 1920s and 1930s, the gulf between the two Karelias only grew. Lauri's father had served in the paramilitary Suojolaskunta, the right-wing civil guards, and he had a deep-rooted hatred for communism, which young Lauri shared. Lauri had a strong constitution, and he was a natural athlete, spending his days swimming, cross-country skiing, and boxing, but it was the tales of great warriors and soldiers that fascinated young Lauri more than anything else. He wanted nothing more than to be a soldier, and spent his time following Viipuri's garrison around, collecting casings and cartridges, to the point that his father even described him as war crazy. As soon as he was old enough, he volunteered for the youth organization of the paramilitary Civil Guard. They taught him things like camping, marching, and marksmanship. At 17, he left the Civil Guards, on the wishes of his parents, to go to business school. But it was pretty clear from the outset that school did not interest the stubborn young man in the slightest. Lauri saw his destiny as becoming a soldier. And in September 1938, at the age of 19, he volunteered for the Finnish Army and was assigned to the 4th Jäger Infantry Battalion, which was stationed close to his hometown. The Jäger were light mobile infantry, excelling in skirmishing and ambush, moving quickly on bicycles and skis throughout the countryside. Lauri soon proved himself to be an exceptional soldier. He was highly motivated and quick-thinking. He was also a typical Finn in that he did not engage in useless talk and was all business on duty. He did, however, have a fiery temper, and it got him into frequent fights. But after just a few months, He had impressed his superiors enough to be sent on an NCO training course. Lauri Törni graduated first in his class. While he was training, the political situation in Europe, well, the world, was deteriorating rapidly. Nazi Germany had assembled a huge modern army, and after the Sudetenland crisis and the occupation of Czechia, it was obvious they were not shy about using it. That, and the reports of political terror in the Soviet Union, were, of course, a big concern for the Finns. The invasion of Poland in September 1939 by first Germany and then the USSR as well confirmed Finland's fears. Just after that, Joseph Stalin demanded bases and concessions from Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, who began to fall under Soviet control. Little Finland saw itself boxed in between the two giants.
That's crazy.
It seemed only a matter of time until hostile eyes would fall on them. And soon they did. As the autumn of 1939 rolled on, the Soviet Foreign Office made repeated demands to the Finns, urging them to give up territory in Karelia and on the Baltic coast, the Rybaki Peninsula with the nickel mines in Petsamo, and to allow Soviet troops to cross Finnish territory. Now, before anyone writes in about Stalin's actual or theoretical motivations for these demands, I cover the Winter War in its entirety, week by week in real time over on my World War II channel, including all of the weeks leading up to it and
Didn't
all
realize
of
he
the
had his own
political
channel.
machinations. So I'm not going to discuss it here because I already do it in far more depth over there. Well, the Finnish government staunchly refused.
He's telling you to
as this
shut up.
pact of friendship would involve giving up their entire line of defense against any Soviet attack. And it would also threaten the integrity of Finland as a whole. Again, go discuss this at the other channel. So all the
Really,
politicians
please
spoke of peace.
shut up.
While the Finnish Defensive Council, around Field Marshal Carl Gustav Mannerheim, was well aware that refusing Stalin was poking the bear. It was a race against time to prepare Finland against a possible Soviet attack. Mannerheim ordered Finland's main defensive line on the isthmus from the coast to Lake Ladoga to be reinforced as strongly as possible. Soon, tens of thousands of Finns were manning and building up the fortifications, soon called the Mannerheim Line by a French journalist.
This sounds really familiar.
Lauri Törni
The
was part
Mannerheim
of a
Line.
21,000-man strong covering force spread out between the Mannerheim Line and the border. They were to harass and delay the enemy as long as possible, scorching the earth of anything useful. The Finns had a well-trained and well-motivated army, but only a few things like anti-tank guns and artillery pieces. The only two tanks actually in their service were
That's
32
wicked.
obsolete Renault FT tanks from 1919 and a few unarmed Vickers Armstrong 6-tonners. Nothing that would come even close to what the Soviets could throw at them. Well aware of the disparity of force, and of course, the amount of manpower each side could raise, Soviet Red Army Command didn't concern itself with Finnish preparations and planned to simply steamroll across the isthmus in one huge offensive and into the Finnish heartland. War came November 30th. After a forced incident on the border, the Soviet Union attacked Finland. All along the isthmus, the Soviet artillery opened up. Törni's unit was at breakfast as heavy shells began falling all around the camp. The men of Törni's units were suddenly facing the advancing 120,000 men and
Jesus.
1,400 tanks of the Soviet 7th Army. And this was just a part of the Soviet attacking force. Törni and his unit made a fighting retreat. The Finns mined the streets and sniped at the enemy as they fell back. They really had the terrain advantage on their side. Along the entire border with the USSR lies some of the densest forest on Earth. And the only part of it where an enemy could attack in large force with things like tanks was pretty much on the Isthmus of Karelia. But even the Karelian terrain, with its own forests and marshes, offered only a few good roads for the Soviet armored columns, and that basically funneled them into killing zones. The weather was now getting worse by the day as well. It was one of those harshest winters in history that you hear about in pretty much every war that ever happened in winter, but the winter of 1939-1940, it really was one of them. Temperatures soon dropped dozens of degrees below zero, and
Jeez.
snowdrifts could be as high as 2 or 3 meters in the
That's so
forests.
crazy to try to
The
fight that.
Soviets, for the most part, had no skis, and where the Finns were at home. In such conditions, the Red Army's overwhelming numbers meant little. and Törni's Jäger were able to delay their advance for a whole week before joining the main line. Defensive fighting continued all December long as the Finns tried to hold back the waves of Soviet troops. Finnish casualties were surprisingly low, as their enemy was constantly prevented from concentrating force. But as the new year began, tens of thousands of Soviet troops were starving and freezing to death in snow and ice-covered trenches. Once halted, the Soviet column was forced to try to dig into the frozen ground, waiting for supplies and reinforcements to come in. In many parts of Finland, supplies could not come in though, and I am not exaggerating about Soviet soldiers starving to death. In their white snowsuits, the Finns were like ghosts, moving unseen through the snow-covered ridges and forests. Törni lived for the excitement of sneaking up close to a Soviet position and attacking with hand grenades and Molotov cocktails. Bit by bit, such quick hit-and-run attacks with submachine guns and satchel charges whittled down and destroyed the Soviet positions. Törni soon made a name for himself as a daredevil who did not shy away from danger. He embraced it. He loved the adrenaline rush and the chaos of combat. Instead of being stressed or shaken, Törni remained totally calm and focused. He soon commanded his own squad as he rose to Alikersantti, under sergeant, and led his men like wolves on the prowl, overrunning enemy trenches and dragging prisoners back to their own lines. Over the course of the winter, the Soviets suffered dearly for every inch of Finnish territory they took.
That's so crazy to think about, like,
but their casualties
fighting in the snow with
and their
people wearing
ammunition
white.
could be replaced.
That'd be creepy.
The Finns had only a small pool of manpower and resources, and no allies other than international volunteers on which to call. A peace treaty between Finland and the Soviet Union was signed March 12, 1940. Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov, the guy Molotov cocktails are named after, read out the peace terms.
That's badass.
The Soviets will move the Finnish border and take the whole Karelian Isthmus, including Viipuri. This region was home to 12% of the Finnish population. The Soviets will lease Hanko Peninsula, take the Ribaki Peninsula, a bunch of islands off the coast, and some land near Salla. This is all roughly 25,000 square miles of land, but perhaps more importantly, every naturally occurring defensive line Finland has. Finns in the ceded land had 2 weeks in which to evacuate. They could choose to remain in their homes and become part of the Soviet Union, but not a single one did. True story. Well over 400,000 Finns were rendered homeless, and Törni's family was among the long trail of refugees that made their way across the new border. Törni, however, had not fought his last battles. He was sent to officer school, graduating as second lieutenant. The world, however, was descending further and further into war. Törni had not seen the end of it by a long shot. Remember, he was a soldier of 3 armies, and the Finnish army was just one of them.
That's so badass. I didn't realize that they held off the Soviet army like during the earlier starts of World War II. And so I'm just imagining guys fighting in all white on a white background of like snow. Like, that's probably would look so cool to see. I mean, not be the Soviets, obviously. That would be really bad, but what a great song.
Now, another thing different about today is you have brought something with you. You have a book with you.
Yes, I did bring a book.
Born a Soldier, The Times and Life of Lauri Thorn, J. Michael Cleverly. Now, they might not know who Lauri Thorn is because it's not mentioned in the first episode, but it is an alias that Lauri Törni uses, foreshadowing later on in his life and career. He
We need to get
Yes.
So why
have
do
a
you
better
have this book
headset
with you?
with a better
It's
mic.
kind of special in a way. 2 things. One, it inspired
Go fund
lyrics, or me writing the song in a way.
Yeah.
And especially also, it's a cool thing that we always kept asking our fans to send us emails or books for that matter. And if you do give us books, please make sure they're in sort of English, Swedish, Danish, or Norwegian that we could understand. But this one was actually given to me by a guy called Petri, and he's been around for a while. I think I met him, I guess it's almost 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
Finnish guy. We met in a sauna on a boat between
Of
Sweden
course
and
you did.
Finland.
Okay. Oh, is it on one of the rock boats, so like a music boat?
Yes. And no, it's really over the years.
That's awesome.
He kept,
I didn't
nagging
realize
me,
they
"You
accept
should
gifts.
talk
I'm going to send them one of my books.
I'm like, yeah, whatever. And of course, we've been, in the sauna drinking or whatever.
Yeah.
And I forget because I'm senile, okay? So after a few years, he gave me this book.
Yeah.
And that's a song.
Well, a couple of things hit me about that. No, 3 points. Okay, one, you said if they give you books, they should be in English or Swedish or a language that you understand. Let's say, for example, that there was like a book about smoking snakes that somebody really wanted you to read, but it was only in Portuguese. Couldn't some Brazilian guy just stand next to you for a few days and just, just read it out loud, translating, going, and then, come on, that'd be okay, right? Yeah. Or since you obviously encourage people to send you books and things for ideas for other songs, why don't, because you're on lockdown, why don't we just print like your home address on the screen, right? And then people can send things by DHL,
No.
Federal Express, and then you'll have lots of great books to read while
Let's
you're
put my home address on the internet. That's
Of course.
brilliant.
I mean, what could possibly wrong? Nothing. I mean, worst case scenario, you get some books. Absolute worst case scenario. Nothing else could possibly happen.
No.
No, I did have another point I wanted to make. Something else. You mentioned that you met him on one of those music.
I have to
boats,
find out
and
how
I
to
think
send him a book.
maybe
I
a
will
lot of
totally
people
send him
around
a
the world
book.
don't know is that for the quarter of a century that I've lived in Sweden, and I'm sure back before, there's always been rock boats on the Baltic. There's always boats several times a year. It used to be once a
That's
week
so
on
gnarly.
Wednesdays. I saw Fireside, the first show I saw on a
That's
boat,
so
in, like
gnarly.
the little teen disco on a Wednesday night biking line. But the rock the boat things are great.
Yeah, so many good bands I've seen on those. I mean, I saw old Black Sabbath singer Tony Martin perform there.
Yeah.
And, lots of good stuff.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome thing about the North. I hope that other areas of the world have like rock ferries and things like that, but I fear that they
We
don't.
kind of do in the
Well,
United
there's
States.
70,000 tons of metal. They're starting in America now with these cruises
Okay, cool.
from Florida going out. But, I mean, I think the first one was in 2011, so they're pretty late to the party.
Pretty late to the party. Okay, well, then speaking of parties, I think episode 1 about Lauri Törni, the soldier of 3 armies, is just about done for today because we have a bunch of other stuff we want to talk about him, and they can get to that in parts 2 and part 3. So I will say goodbye for this week.
Goodbye for this week.
From Sabaton History.
Nice.
All
So
right, everyone, you know the drill.
yeah,
Click,
I was-
click, click, click.
Click,
Get
click, click,
some
click.
Subscriptions. Check out
okay, yeah, click my stuff. That stuff is not clickable. But good information there for the winter. The man of the 3 armies. I knew that he moved across a couple different armies from the song. But it's awesome to see him go so deep into it. Like, and each episode is going to be about what army he joined. So I'm super excited to see what part 2 is going to hold. But think again, I know these ones get kind of long. I try not to pause it. So I usually just talk over it because I don't want to pause it and make it like a 25-minute video when the videos are already almost 20 minutes long. Either way, guys, you have yourself a wonderful day and a great weekend. Make sure you hit like, comment, and subscribe. I am trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, so let's try to make it happen. We're so close, and I appreciate you all. Thank you so much again for tuning in. Wash your hands, stay safe, and I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.